This earlier today, Republicans held a press conference where they presented evidence of corruption by Joe Biden and his family in a scheme that saw Biden family members, James Biden, Hunter Biden, selling access to Joe Biden. And Republicans said to the media with all frustration, you guys don't seem to care. Watergate was a story broken by, not by law enforcement or the government, but by the Washington Post. Here's Representative James Comer.
Instead of being honest with the American people, President Biden has claimed since the 2020 election that his family has not received money from China. That was a lie in 2020, and he continues to lie to the American people now. The Bidens have received millions of dollars from China. It is inconceivable that the president did not know it. The White House refuses to correct the president's statements, showing the president is now using the federal government to run interference for his families and his own role in these schemes.
Joining me on the program right now is the legendary Cal Thomas. His book is A Watchman in the Night, where he takes us through over 50 years of journalism. Cal Thomas, thank you so much for joining us. It's an honor.
Thank you.
Let's talk about the book. I mean, you said it to me just before we went live that you started at NBC in the early 1960s. What was it like for the beginning of your career?
Well, it was wonderful because I had some tremendous mentors. These were men then, women came later, but men who came from newspapers and wire services. They wrote all their own stuff. They were real journalists, probably many of them, if not most of them, were Democrats, but they were fair. David Brinkley, one of the most famous at the time, once said it's impossible to be objective, so we must try to be fair. I think that's one of the great statements ever about what real journalism is. But in that clip you just played, and in the reaction to it by the media, the media were all over Ivanka Trump for some of her business dealings, but they completely ignore or play down what the Biden family has done. As Mr. Comer said today, they set up all these LLCs to launder money from various countries, China, Romania, and others, through this system and into the pockets of the Biden family, including grandchildren. There is no known business that any member of the Biden family has created that provides a product or service to anybody. It was all to enrich them. And it's a disgrace. It's an even bigger disgrace that the media ignore it and that Democrats don't apply the same standards they claim to have applied to Donald Trump and other Republicans.
What would be the reaction? I mean, obviously, a laptop might not be available in the early 1960s, but let's just say it was a ledger, right? If a ledger was discovered, that was owned by the president's son, that detailed business dealings, connections, perhaps proof of influence peddling. I mean, how would the media have reacted if that had happened, Republican or Democrat president?
Well, you're not old enough to remember the Eisenhower era when the media made a big deal over something called a vicuna coat that was given to somebody within the Eisenhower administration, and that was supposed to be a big scandal. It was also a scandal, according to the media, that Eisenhower liked to play golf on weekends. So things have really changed. The media is in the tank for all Democrats. I mean, there have been polls for years that have shown the overwhelming number of journalists and other media people are Democrats and vote only for Democrats. You can't say that you can approach the news with that kind of worldview and be fair. A friend of mine, the talk show host Chris Plant, has said the greatest power of the media is the power to ignore. So you're right in your earlier statement. I mean, opinion is no longer relegated to the editorial and op-ed pages. It's all over the newspapers.
Yeah, I mean, we see this not just with politicians, if there's a mass shooting and the shooter is inconvenient to a certain narrative that the media would like to promote, they just kind of move quickly away from the story and, let's say, pivot to gun control. We've seen them, and I don't know if they think it's back in the day, but this crazy thing called the internet lets regular people, kind of fact check the media. We're not just empty-minded consumers. Many of us are active-minded. We understand what they're feeding us, and it seems like they still think because they say it on television, we just take it as the gospel truth.
Well, it's an insular profession now. They read and watch only their own stuff. I'll tell you one of my favorite stories. A columnist for the New York Times who I know called me a year or so ago about something, and then at the end of the conversation said, "By the way, are you still writing your column?" I said, "Yeah, 39 years and counting." I felt like saying, "Are you still writing yours?" They only read each other's stuff. They only read each other's books. If you only go to their universities, Harvard, Yale, Princeton, some of the University of California system, then you're legitimate. But if you are a conservative and if you don't go to the right schools and your stuff doesn't appear in what they regard as the right newspapers, meaning the New York Times and Washington Post, then you're to be ignored. This is a subtle form of censorship and bias that has affected people's view of politics and Republicans and conservatives for some time. But you're right, social media can be a blessing and it can also be a curse. The constitutional republic we have enjoyed for many years now is in danger of being overrun by secular progressives and by people who really want to destroy this country. And if we want to take it back, we've got to be active between elections, not just on election day. You can't get in shape by watching a exercise video. You got to actually go to the gym. And the same is true when you're talking about the country and politics, the economy, the border, and everything else.
I'm going to run out of time here. I could do this all day, sir. We'll have to book you again. You have to come on my radio program. You know, when I was I'm a rarity in the talk radio game. I actually went to journalism school because my goal was to be a rock radio DJ. And silly me, I thought you needed a journalism degree to do that. But you know, I thought journalists were supposed to do the who, the what, the when, the why, and the how, and leave everything else to the opinion section, and to go where the story leads you, right? Not to infuse your personal opinion or your personal politics to pillory some political figures and protect others. And it seems like that's what journalism is today. It's a protection racket for one party. I've got a minute.
Yeah, well, that's true. And it has changed over the years. So many media people now, especially journalists, see themselves as a part of the system, the fourth estate, and they think that they are equal to government, or at least government when it's run by Democrats. And you look at the coverage. I mean, if you put two newspapers side by side, let's say the Washington Post and the Washington Times, you would think you were dealing with two different countries. The Post slants everything to the secular progressive side. It's all about transgenderism. It's all about abortion. It's all about right-wing MAGA Republicans. And you look at the Washington Times, and they cover things like the Comer news conference today, which the Post, I can almost guarantee you, will bury in the paper if they carry it at all. So that's a form of a bias that shapes opinion. And we've got to be more active in the way we approach these things by being involved, again, not just on election day, but in every other day of the year, because the left is.
Well, unfortunately, they consider themselves the guardians of the good lie, and they believe they need to craft for us the news because anything else might be too dangerous and icky.